Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for welcome to the Bear Facts podcast. Polling is such an incredibly important thing in political campaigns, and I'm proud of what we're doing at Bear Facts. Our mission is to amplify the voice of the people to shape the future of our community, and our community is San Antonio and Bexar County. And I'm really pleased to have a number of leading lights in the political world in San Antonio joined today with the Bear Facts podcast. I'm honored to have Dr. Laura Barbarena. Laura is a Democrat. We're a bipartisan group, and we're reflected with 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans today. Laura is a Democrat. She's from Austin, Texas. She's the owner of VIVA Politics. She's a great communications consultant. She specialized in messaging and media strategies for a number of years. I've known Laura for a long time. She used to work at the DNC. She worked for Gutierrez Associates, which was she was a creative director there, producing TV, newspaper, radio, all the Hispanic outreach for the Clinton Gore '96 campaign. But I certainly know Laura from working with Laura mostly together. We're mostly been on the same side of everything in the local races in San Antonio, where she ran the original Minjarez campaign for state representative, Manny Pelaez, Rebecca Viagran, who's on the city council, Senator Laura Vandepute, Senator José Menéndez, and is now working on the Yes for Transit campaign. Laura, welcome. Thank you for taking the time. I know this is a crazy season right now, your busiest time of the year, but thank you for joining us.
Yes, it's a testament to your work, Christian, that I'll stop everything that I'm doing and do this show. But thank you, Bear Facts, for doing this. I love having these kinds of conversations, sort of digging deep into the data to learn and talk about these issues, because politics is more than just about candidates. And so I'm just really excited about having this conversation today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it's truly an honor to have you here. You're incredibly distinguished, and congratulations on your doctorate. What is this now? 2 years, 3 years?
I think I've had it 3 years now. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I didn't want to date that.
It took me more than 3 to get it, but go Longhorns. Yes, I'm a graduate of the College of Communications. I've got my PhD there under the tutelage of Dr. Roderick Hart. So it's a pleasure to be of that pedigree and to sort of be a practitioner, right? I bring the academic as well as the practitioner perspective to what I do.
That's awesome. And so, but you got your degree in film.
Well, actually, my undergraduate degree is in film. So I did my undergraduate degree at UT Austin, and it was in RTF, radio, television, and film, only because I was actually an acting major, little known secret. I was actually a BFA acting major, didn't like what was going on, decided I would act in movies across campus. So I ended up graduating with a degree in RTF there. Then I went to St. Mary's for my master's in international relations, and then ended up back at UT Austin for my PhD in communication studies, where I studied language and political rhetoric.
Oh, that's awesome. Gosh, I didn't know that. That's incredibly impressive. Well, Laura, again, let me bring in some of our other cohorts here. But thank you again for taking out the time. On our Republican side is Tom Marks. Tom is the founder of Fleur de Lis Political Consulting. Tom and I have duked it out over the years on the Republican versus Democratic side of things. But Tom is also very accomplished. Tom has managed a lot of the larger school bond efforts in Bexar County. A lot of those have been toughly fought. Tom's also worked for one of my favorite people on the Republican side is Speaker Joe Strauss. He was the first speaker from San Antonio of the Texas House in hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. He worked and ran the campaigns for County Commissioner Kevin Wolf. Probably, certainly on the north side of town, Tom, your relationships with the city council members. I know you've worked in District 9 for a number of years, and currently is working and campaign manager for Trish DeBerry, who's running for county commissioner to replace Kevin Wolf. That's going to be a toughly fought race this coming November. So Tom, welcome. First, we're going to get into this when we bring Jonathan and Jorge in as well. But Tom, what was it about politics that made you decide politics is going to be my future? And
I used to love to read the paper with my dad when I was a kid. So when I was in 5th grade was Clayton, Williams, and Richards. And I don't know how my dad explained it to me, especially trying to overcome the some of the comments that Clayton Williams made to a 5th grader, nonetheless, and why Clayton went on to lose. But after then, it just sort of had the bug. And undergraduate degree, political science, mostly political philosophy. I think I learned what and why people think. And then grad school was statistics, emphasis on polling. So figuring out, exactly what motivates people to think. So just kind of, it's always been there.
Well, Tom, you're on the opposite side of Laura and I on the political spectrum, but I think it shows again, like I mentioned to Laura, it's an honor for you to be here and for just to have a discussion about how do we make our community better. You come at it from a different perspective than Laura and I do, but you're well-respected Republican leader in our community, and I think your voice is very valuable. And like I mentioned to Laura, I know this is the craziest time in the world for you guys. And thank you for joining us.
Sure.
And for having this conversation. The next guy I'm going to bring in, I've actually got a little bit of a longer term relationship with, and that's Jorge Urby. Jorge hails from Del Rio, Texas. He is the CEO of the Glider Group, which is a communications, creative production, public affairs business. He and I are both proud graduates of Texas State University. And Jorge and I worked on the Castro brothers, Julian and Joaquin's campaigns over the years. Jorge stayed on a lot longer than I did, but also went to work for Beto O'Rourke as well. And currently running the San Antonio Ready to Work campaign. Jorge, we outnumber Tom 3-1 right now. Let's throw some stuff at it.
I like our chances, man.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Jorge, similar question. How did you get involved in politics and why?
Look, I mean, honestly, man, not something that was really in my household, right? I grew up with a single mom. She was just trying to put food on the table. So we were just trying to make it, right? And I'm in college, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. Sort of like Laura, I was sort of into film, but also like politics in a way. And then by chance, I met the brothers, man, through a friend of mine, the twins. And I was so fascinated with their story because I was like, man, here's these two young guys, didn't grow up with much, got educated at the best schools in the country, maybe the world. And we're coming back to help the people that they grew up with and in their community. And I was just inspired. I was like, you know what? Let me help them out. And so I got involved with Joaquin when he ran for state rep. And then, of course, when Julian ran for mayor, which, by the way, you were on the other side and you beat him. So thank you for that.
But we came together and won it together. So
yeah. No.
Years later.
We had to go get you after that. We were like, well, if you can't beat them.
Okay, maybe that's where we met because I worked on Joaquin's original state rep race back in the days, back when they used to live on Sunshine. Many gotten back. Yeah.
Laura, what year was that?
We started running in 01.
2002.
Yeah, he was in 02 and then 04, of course.
Yeah.
He still, by the way, lives on or his brother still has that same house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is truly an inspirational story. I certainly, obviously I don't have the, I don't have the deep knowledge of them from years and years. I grew up in Washington, D.C. and wanted to do nothing with politics, right? Just wanted to get away from it, which is why I moved to Texas. But as soon as I heard their story, I just realized how fascinating they were. And it was an honor to run a campaign against them, but then to turn around and join forces and to be involved in some of their success is certainly one of my badges of honor in my career in running campaigns. So, and then finally, let me bring in a cohort, also a Republican So we're going to give up a little bit of our control here, and that is my friend Jonathan Delmer. Jonathan is a native from San Antonio. He's president of the Alamo Strategic Group. Was a former candidate, ran for office himself, but he's been Jonathan and I got to know one another when he was president of a very popular, huge neighborhood association. Delmer was a true leader on that, but he's also been involved in a ton of different campaigns, from district attorney to sheriff, and also works for city council member from District 10, Clayton Perry. Also, Jonathan, you're working on the Vote Yes for Transit campaign as well right now, doing social media work and some of the digital stuff. Jonathan, I'm going to throw the same thing at you, buddy. What was it? What inspired you to get involved in politics?
Happy to be here, y'all, and it's a great honor to be with these fine individuals. And I feel like I'm a little out of place. Y'all are a lot more accomplished than I am in the political realm. I had a very political father here in San Antonio who was a doctor, and I started on my first campaign with Bob Kruger a long, long time ago. And I mean, this was when I was 11 years old, I think, and then went on to Bush and Reagan and things like that. But just the thought of and seeing my father negotiate with doctors on both sides of the aisle, no matter what, and have to come up with good solutions always kept me very interested. And then I just got involved in the neighborhood and fell into some things and been doing it ever since. So,
yeah. Well, Jonathan, it's an honor to have you. And I know you've been heavily engaged in all the neighborhood stuff. So I really appreciate you guys, again, taking the time out from busy, crazy, hectic schedules. This close to the election, pretty phenomenal that I was able to get you guys to do this. So let's get right into it and talk about the election. Voter turnout, right? So we're all always focused in on voter turnout and turning out our voters. Tom, can you tell me what are you seeing right now in Bexar County as far as turnout goes? Are you impressed with the turnout, or how do you view the results so far?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's really interesting considering the fact that, we're sort of tracking right in line with the 2016 turnout, which, in Bexar County was both good for Republicans and good for Democrats. We're sort of, in the 12 and the 2008 and 2012 election, you sort of had the Obama anomaly voters. And then in 2016, you sort of had the rise of sort of the Trump anomaly voters, where we saw new people turning out, people who don't necessarily have general election or even primary election voting history. I mean, the great statistics in 2012, 35,000 people voted in the Republican primary for Precinct 3. In 2016, 75,000 people voted in Precinct 3. So you saw a massive increase, of that sort of, anomaly voter. The fact that we're tracking right now very similarly to 2016 is pretty interesting, so that especially in a post-2018 world where you had sort of what was considered a Democrat, great year, the issue that we've actually sort of tracking back to 2016, I think is really interesting. And statewide, we're already seeing 91% of people who've turned out have previous primary or general election voting history. And so there's very few people who are brand new registrants that are really turning out.
Yeah. Laura, do you see things differently? Are you happy with the turnout?
I don't think I'm going to push. I mean, we talked about this earlier. Do we want to prognosticate?
Prognosticate.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to prognosticate, but I'm really hoping that we're going to see. I don't know that we'll get there, but I'm hoping we'll see something like a 2008 turnout. I mean, that's where we'd like to be. I think in order to turn Texas blue, that's what we need. I think we have the potentials for what we would call the perfect storm, right? The perfect storm to turn Texas blue would be, we have a lot of those elements. For one thing, we have a very, very unpopular incumbent, right, in Donald Trump. And so you see how that drives voter enthusiasm. And we kind of clearly saw that in the Beto Cruz race, right? Like, in that race, we saw this incredible amount of excitement, but it was because basically Cruz made the great, he was the great nemesis that we had. So with Trump, we have that as well. Secondly, we have this, huge influx of money coming in. People are investing money in Texas in a way that it hadn't been done before. So that's, super exciting. And then, have this pandemic, this, uncertain thing. And, and while, we may be on track of 2016 now, we also have a whole extra week of voting. This is a whole extra time that we've not had before. So we're really in the unknown right now. We don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you just from, just speaking from what I'm seeing, lines going around the libraries in a way that I've never seen before. I was on a podcast yesterday and I said, me da escalofrío, right? Which is like, gives me goosebumps to just drive up to a polling site and see people in line. It makes me I get all kind of mushy inside, but I'm so proud to be an American. I'm so proud of our democracy because I see it working, right? And you see this level of enthusiasm that we've just never seen before. And for me, I'm excited. I'm hoping that we can get to 2008 numbers, and we're seeing Latinos and Blacks turning out, certainly in other parts of the country, and we're still seeing more money being spent in Texas. So I'm hoping we're going to get there.
Yeah, well, just let's take a thing that you talked about with regards to voting, right? Bear Facts and our polling. So we hired one of the premier pollsters in the country, a guy named Dave Metz, and Dave has done a series of polls for us in Bexar County, and we put all of our data out there, all the demographics. If you want to know anything, there's nothing that's like, behind the curtain, which is weird in politics, right? Normally we hoard our polling information. At Bear Facts, we push everything out there, including what the demographics are and how it breaks down geographically across Bexar County. So we polled 619 people throughout Bexar County. And they're likely voters, right? So it's not everybody, it's only likely voters. And one of our questions was dealing with mail ballots and access to the ballot. And we wanted to, on the Democratic side of things, and Tom and Jonathan, you guys might completely disagree with me, but it always, to me, feels like the Republicans are trying to stop us and prevent access to ballots, and Democrats are trying to make it more accessible. And so let me throw one right out there. And when we polled Bexar County, at least, on both sides of things, people wanted to have more access to mailing ballots, right? We had, and we asked a series of questions. One, do you think you should be automatically registered when you turn 18? 74% across the board, bipartisan support. Should you automatically register when you get a driver's license? 68%. Should anyone be allowed to vote by mail, right? Which is going to be clearly a controversial thing this year because of kind of the president's dog whistle on mail and ballot. Don't trust it. 66% support voting by mail to anyone. What do you guys see in this? Do you guys have a different point of view on the Republican side, Tom or Jonathan? Do you guys think that there should be a different reason? And do you believe that there's fraud in mail ballots?
Tom,
I want to ask a question real fast. I thought I read at the beginning of the poll that it was registered voters, not likely voters.
Yeah, that's right. It's registered voters.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure because I might have a slight different of opinion if it was just likely voters. Especially considering 2018, some of that anomaly and why Ted Cruz actually won was simply because of the new people who left states and came to Texas and newly registered to vote. So if you dig into the numbers, it's actually multiple generation Texans who went from red to blue, and it was folks who left blue states and came to Texas who actually kept Ted Cruz in office, which I think is interesting when you look at just including them into the new registered voters and the way certain things break down as far as access to ballots. I mean, I was at Brook Hall Library on the first day of voting, and 40,000 people turned in ballots before the polls even opened by mail. But then we had, 33.1 thousand votes on election day or on the first day of early voting. And, and we're starting to see, sort of a decrease since then. I was talking to an election judge at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, and I said, what does it look like out there? And she said half of the voters at Brook Hall Library brought in their mail ballot that had been mailed to them and said, I don't trust the USPS. And so here it is. I mean, I'll bring up anecdotally 4 years ago, It was the last time that I got my my tax return. The check mailed to me, and it was delivered to my neighbor, and they sat on it for 4 days. So I think it's things like that that make people distrust. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with voting by mail, but there is, at least to your poll's point, amongst Republicans, there's a chunk of folks who just don't. They haven't either had a good experience with the USPS, and I think the excitement surrounding this election is really making it one where they may like access to it, but at this point in time, they don't necessarily trust it wholeheartedly.
Yeah,
I think also the forms that are for dead people, for all the stories that you see about thousands of lost ballots and all that kind of stuff. The distrust, I would have to agree with Tom 100% that there's a lot of distrust out there with the post office. And I think one of your Democrat senators said, oh God, I can't remember his name, but said that there was a problem with the vote in mail, on video years ago. So I saw a lot of people Monday. I was at Tobin, Monday morning, never seen that many people there for one election, for opening day. So it was incredible to see. But I think a lot of people just have a distrust of the post office and, making sure their ballot's going to get there.
Is this a new thing, Laura? Like, is the distrust because Trump doesn't believe that mail ballots are real and that there's going to be this massive voter fraud? Because, up until now, I mean, mail ballots has never been that controversial. I mean, mail ballots, we're trying to, isn't it our jobs? Like, don't the five of us want to see more people vote and
Absolutely.
And I'm going to piggyback and let Jorge jump in on the back end of my answer. But that is, something's happened in Texas that hasn't happened before, which is a mass push for vote by mail. Keep in mind, prior to this, people that voting by mail, structurally here in Texas, I think there's an article in it today that we're like the worst state when it comes to access to voting, right? We're number one, woohoo! Another thing to be proud of in Texas. But what's happened because of the pandemic is you've seen this real push for vote by mail in a way that we've never had before. So people who traditionally had not ever voted by mail are suddenly voting by mail, and now they're getting messages of not just from Trump, but then from our USPS workers saying they just broke down 2 machines. And so keep in mind, these are new people who've never voted by mail before, and now they're getting messages of there's problems in the system. So I think those kind of 2 things kind of create this sentiment. And I'll let Jorge sort of piggyback off of that if you want to jump in.
Sure. No, thank you very much. Look, bottom line is we need more access for people to vote. Bottom line, we're living in a pandemic. None of us could have predicted this. And the fact of the matter is you got to adapt, right? I got to give a lot of credit to Commissioner Justin Rodriguez. I don't know if y'all follow him, but he was massively pushing for these super centers to open more locations all around the city to make sure that people, if they needed to get curbside assistance, there was more people to help people to vote. Mail-in ballots are important. If you put in the right mechanisms in place, it should be fine. I agree with you, Christian. Like, I think that the president has exacerbated the issue. They've studied voter fraud ad nauseum, and if you look at it, the numbers of cases are 0.000006 or something like that %. So, could there be issues? Absolutely, but there's issues in everything. We're the United States of America. We can figure this out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially like when it comes to computing, shouldn't you be able to register to vote online? Like, is that really a thing that you can't just you can go to the library and get a library card, but you can't register to vote without
Christian, there was a study recently released by Latino Decisions, who I do work with, and they, we're talking about what's the difference between California Latinos and Texas Latinos, and why is the turnout in California so much greater than in Texas among Latinos? And the study found it's structural issues, right? Just exactly what Jorge is saying, access to be able to vote, right? So the fact that 30 days before an election, I am no longer an American citizen. Why? Because I can't register to vote in that election. Why is it one day I have the full rights of an American citizen, and then the next day I don't. It doesn't make sense. And we in Texas have been doing it for so long that we no longer question it. It's like, oh, sure, 30 days out, that's our voter registration deadline.
Laura, in our poll, Bexar County, now, right, this is Bexar County likely voters, 56% said you should be allowed to register to vote on election day itself. 40% opposed it, right, and said no. But I mean, I still don't understand why you just can't go in and be like, yeah, I'm arrested.
Wait, how about a national holiday on election day? How about we give people a day off to go vote, right? Because as you know, I mean, look, it's disadvantageous to the working class and people in poverty, right? Because do I vote or do I go work my 2 jobs and put food on the table? I mean, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things we can do to help people gain access to go vote.
And I think there's something interesting that's also happened is you've seen sort of a split within the Republican Party too, where, Governor Abbott has, graciously extended the voting period because of pandemic, and then part of the party sues him for it. So it's just strange. Like,
Tom, Jonathan, you guys have, I'd like the governor's move to extend.
Something Jorge said, San Antonio Independent School District is closed. The entire district, every school. They voted all the schools. So every one of those schools are closed. So the argument that they don't have a place to vote is not correct. All those schools are closed to the students, and those are voting centers right now. So I think that is evident in a lot of places over San Antonio. Now, granted, there's some that aren't, but on the west side, I know for certain, because my wife happens to work there, that they're closed the day of the election. So the students aren't interacting with people voting.
Well, Jonathan, let me ask you this. Sorry, it's kind of a tough question. It's a partisan. It's a partisan question. That is, did you support Abbott extending voting for a week? I mean, I was shocked. I'm not afraid to admit it. I was shocked that the governor said, "Hey, let's throw in an extra week." I was like, "Wait, what?" Was that shocking?
We're all better with getting more people to the polls and voting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I'll argue with anybody that says, no, we just need to, if we can have, more voting, more people are there, and it's better for democracy.
Yeah. Well, it was clear as a bell in the polling, at least in Bexar County, through the Bexar Facts poll, that people want more access and they want the ability to register on the same day and be able to vote by mail. What was shocking to me was the number of people that said that they would vote by mail. 17%. To Jorge's point about we're living in a pandemic and people are afraid to go vote in person, that 17% said that they would go vote in person, or I'm sorry, by mail. The other thing we've got going on is early voting. 60% said that they would actually go to the polls and vote in person. Hey guys, I'm gonna jump ahead. We could probably talk for the rest of the day about access to the ballot. I think it's very healthy to have this conversation. It's an evolving thing.
The graph that was just up there talking about voting by mail, I think it's really interesting if you generalities aside, look at those numbers. You start off at the top about pandemic issues, and then you go down to the bottom about secure, proven, nonpartisan, increased voter fraud, and risky. And you can visually see that the people who agree that it's secure, proven, nonpartisan, increases voter fraud, and there's fewer people that agree with that and more people that disagree with that. So your own poll is showing that people who are in favor of increased mail ballots when it comes to the pandemic issue, but when it comes to perhaps a daily issue that happened with their mail, they have real problems with it still.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but Tom, let me ask you this. And
the next stat I was going to throw out is Australia has punitive measures in place for compulsory voting, and they still don't have 100%. They register everybody at 18, and they fine you if you don't turn out, and they still don't have 100% voting. We all know new registered voters are some of the hardest people to turn out, especially if they don't have any sort of voting history from another state or another city. So if they re-register here, they're considered a new registrant, but they may have voter history that we can rely upon. But it is 75 times more likely that a new registered voter with no voter history is not going to turn out than they are going to turn out.
Yeah, so, but don't we want to change that?
Yeah, but
don't we want to get everybody?
The goal is talking to registered voters, not just likely voters. There's been no pushback with motor voter laws or anything like that. I mean, you should be able to register your vote when you sign up for the draft.
But why would we ever purge a voter unless they died? Shouldn't we just? Why would we purge a voter? If you're registered to vote,
voters, I'm not.
Yeah, no. But I mean,
the way to do it is basically just register to vote when you get your birth certificate when you're a few hours old, and then just cut you off the list when you die.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think that the point that I'm about to make is good and sad, right? There's a group in Houston. All of these Latino women were about to be purged off of the voter rolls. And this group came together and said, no, we're going to go communicate with them, because if they didn't vote in that election, they were going to get purged the next cycle. And they got something like a 62% turnout of those people when they were told, when they were threatened, you're about to be eliminated. And it flipped Harris County forever. And, I think that we ought to do that. I want people to go vote no matter what, but two, purging them off the ballots, off the voter rolls.
Christian, and what you're touching upon is really critical, because these are the key constituencies, right? We keep talking about, the white suburban women and, the such and such, the white suburban women is what this election is all about. No, these low information voters is what we call them. They are critical, right? How do we get them the information that they need to turn them into voters, right? And as Tom mentioned, that's an expensive prospect. And in campaigns, when we have limited resources, we tend to grab that low-hanging fruit, which is people who vote and have a history of voting. Reaching up high to get those non-voters, that's a little hard, right? It takes more money, it takes more time, but that is going to be key in this election. Why? Because now we have a boogeyman in Trump that is going to activate people, right? He is going to be the one that's going to turn these low information voters into information seekers. And that's going to be the critical turning point for the state, I think.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm going to move on like I promised I would 5 minutes ago, too. And I don't know if this is controversial or not. And so Jorge and I actually worked on for Mayor Castro on the original Pre-K for SA campaign, which is going to appear on the ballot this November. Originally, and this is actually the reason a lot of people don't understand polls in the first place, right? And it's part of the reason why we founded Bear Facts as a nonprofit, is to be able to get into the polling data and to understand how people really view it. And our original polls, Jorge, I don't know if you remember, but neither one of the polls that we did showed that Pre-K would pass. Mm-hmm. And we had to take our message, communicate to the right voters as to why it's important and how we could change lives in San Antonio. And then, to Laura's point, you got to communicate the right message and be able to say, this is why it's important. And, we did it successfully under Mayor Castro. And it was kind of one of his premier, kind of badges of honor in his mayoral tenure was Pre-K for SA. It polls through the roof right now. I know that.
I can tell you that Julian thinks that is the number one thing from his tenure, for sure. Uh-huh. It was the most important thing that they probably did. It became a national model. And I remember, it looked in a dire situation, and we were turning around. And so, and just look at it now, right? From going from that, and 8 years later, overwhelming support.
Yeah.
That's the one that we know is going to be okay in November,
Yeah. I just wanted to piggyback real quick that I remember at the time, the big kind of thing that we were all talking about is, should it be on the November ballot or should it be on the May ballot? Do you remember that? What would we do? What would we do? And then to Jorge's point here about now there's all this support when there wasn't, we see that with with Obamacare, with the ACA, where there was very little support. And now that it's in place, now you see a bunch of support for it. So it's interesting how, once you convince people and they get to see the outcome of that particular piece of, legislation, they kind of come on board eventually.
And it's also a very well-run program, right? And I think voters, can see that. And the studies have shown that it's doing a great service to our city, and they're going to reward it, I think, in the ballot box this time.
Yeah, Speaker Strauss called it the gold standard of pre-K programming. There it is, right on cue. Speaker Strauss said that it's the gold standard. The pivot point was when when we really communicated in a nonpartisan or a bipartisan way, when we got business leaders and when we got community activists, and we all sat in a room and really worked on and tried to get, like we're doing right now, is trying to have a good understanding, respectful understanding of what pre-K is about and why it benefits our community. So 66% support. Jonathan, I know over the years you've been skeptical about it. I don't know if you remain skeptical, or Tom.
That might be one of the only things that I'll disagree with Joe about. How can other schools, have children at $7,500 a piece, and pre-K for SA is over $20,000 a piece? That's more than St. Mary's Hall to have, children, kindergartens educated. That's a heck of a bill. That's a lot of money that can be spent elsewhere. Seems like schools all over San Antonio can teach their kindergartners for a lot less than 3 times as much, which I think is an arguable point. But and the teachers get paid very well, so I have to be very careful with what I say about that.
Yes, your wife will kill you
for good reason. And that would be the part that I would absolutely agree with, and I think everybody will, that teachers never, ever have been paid what they're worth. There is no question about that anywhere. It's just the cost per student, I think, is the issue. Do we need something like that? Sure, but can we do it for a little bit better number? Does it have to cost that much per student?
Yeah. Tom, are you a pre-K supporter? Are you opposed to it? I know back in the day, Kevin opposed it, right?
Wait, say again?
Didn't Kevin oppose pre-K? Like, he was vocally out against it, right?
Yeah, in 2012 he was. But I think the interesting thing about pre-K as opposed to other things is that, it has 8 years of existing. And so, knowing Speaker Strauss the way I do, having worked for him, spent a lot of time with him. It's an interesting thing that, they have an ROI. They have measurable, numbers that they can look at and say, hey, for every $100 you invest in early childhood education, you get $156 back into our economy. And that has been a big message point for him and something he's been pushing out. And it's part of the reason why, Representative Steve Allison is supportive of the pre-K program as well too. I don't know if anybody saw the editorial from Speaker Strauss and Elaine Mendoza, who, by the way, is not a far left progressive. As Abbott appointed her to actually oversee daycare operation during the pandemic cycle. But they were talking about how it's disingenuous to say it's $20,000 per pupil when there's a grant program that actually more than doubles the student body, which actually makes the overall cost per student comparable to that of a normal public school system. So when you include the grant funded students that are part of that program, that helps bring anybody who could qualify for it but doesn't live near one of the centers, they can actually it floats all boats there.
Yeah, I think the early on point that you made was to me probably the most pivotal, which is return on investment, right? Like, that brought a lot of businessmen and women to the table. And I don't think Julian Mayor Castro had any desire to put a sunset on it, and I think that was part of his give and take, and he agreed and said, "Look, you'll be able to vote on it. Give us time to let it mature and see if there's a return on investment. And if there is, we'll put it before the voters again. And, let the voters decide." In the Bexar Facts poll, 66% seems to me like it's a slam dunk. Seems to me like it's getting bipartisan support across the board and should pass. But you know, in a crazy campaign world, I guess we don't get to take anything for granted. Hey, let me move on beyond pre-K because I think that we see the polling; it's in pretty solid shape. Let's talk about transit, and I know Laura, get us up to speed on transit and what's happening with the Vote Yes for Transit campaign.
Things are just going great. We just had a press conference yesterday to kind of show the grand coalition that we've gotten support, and it's just amazing. And I'm so proud that people really understand that that the people who rely on VIA, that we rely on people who rely on VIA, and that it's an essential service, and that everyone in the city it actually gains from investing in our public transportation. So we've gotten support from many of the chambers, from the South Side Chamber to the North Side Chamber, Hispanic Chamber, and then we've gotten many of the community groups. We've gotten neighborhood associations. We've gotten folks from the disability community. So we're just seeing this huge coalition of a diverse, what I consider San Antonio, what makes San Antonio so great. And they're all coming together behind this transit issue. So I'm just really excited about it. You know, the polls are looking good. I think your poll shows us looking good, but we're going to keep working to the end. You know, Jorge and I, we've worked on so many campaigns. We know that we don't take anything for granted, and we're going to keep working till that very last day. But we've got a very robust digital program going. You know, we're doing a lot of community education. We're sort of doing that real grassroots underground kind of stuff where we're doing all these. I guess one great thing about the pandemic is we're getting to Zoom, so I don't have all this, you know, to travel from place to place. But all these neighborhood groups and organizations are meeting via Zoom, so it gives us a chance to go literally into someone's living room, quite frankly, and be able to tell our story about why we think transit is good for, you know, everyone in San Antonio. So I'm feeling really positive about it, but we're not going to take anything for granted, and we're going to keep working up until Election Day at 7 p.m.
Yeah, you know, Laura, I was surprised. So when we set out with our original baseline poll, I thought that VIA would actually, I don't know why, I thought VIA would originally poll pretty poorly, and they were wildly popular. Here up on the screen, here's the number on transit from our election poll, our fourth poll of the year, 59-30. You know, in when you're running a political campaign, I'd rather be on the 59 side of things. But VIA polled very popular. I was surprised. It was in the mid 60s. It kind of, you know, there were fits and starts behind Connect SA. Are you running into problems with that, Laura, or Jonathan, on the more conservative Republican side? Are you finding Republicans are happy with VIA? And that understand that
our numbers are over 60%, and they have been for a while.
We've been hovering right around 59, 60, 61. So we're really doing great, and that's why kind of we brought Jonathan on is to help us shore up some of that, you know, north side support that we need to get us over the finish line. And I'll let Jonathan speak to the work that he's doing there, but we're really proud to have him a part of the team. And our campaign itself, like. We actually have two campaign managers, me and Kelton Morgan. And so we have a Republican and a Democrat working together, which, you know, really shows sort of the spectrum that we have. And then Jonathan, I'll be quiet now so you can speak to the work that you're doing on the ground for us.
You know, the north side and you know, typically on our side of town, a lot of people don't, you know, use buses as much as they do in other areas of San Antonio. So trying to convince people the need of funding, you know, VIA the way it needs to be funded is a difficult task. There's no question. And I think the VIA on demand is a really important part of that, especially on the north side, because people can understand the Uber and the Lyft mentality. You know, they've got that, and now they know that they can make a phone call and get a car to come pick them up and take them to a bus stop to, you know, send them around town. But we have to have essential workers. We have to have disabled people. We have to have senior citizens get to doctor's appointments. There's such a need for it in San Antonio that I mean, we just have to. It's one of those things. And I know I'm in total opposite of what I was on pre-K, and it wasn't that I didn't want pre-K to be there. It's just the cost part of it, and that's the only thing that I have trouble with. As other people have cost problems with funding VIA.
Yeah,
it's one of those things. But I think it's going to pass, and I think people at the end of the day realize how important it is getting people to work, especially young people that can't afford cars, that can't afford the things, that want to have jobs and that have, need to get them to school, all those types of things. So it's an important part.
Yeah. Well, obviously it's still polling very popular. It's polling even more popular with Democrats and I think that there will be a more progressive bump in Bexar County. I know Tom had said it was on par. I think that because of a presidential cycle, certainly brings out more Democrats. Look, we're living, and I want to get to a few more questions about like how you guys are running the campaigns, but I want to talk about the pandemic for a minute and kind of switch topics and go to the pandemic, and it affected even what we're doing in VIVA Facts, right? We wanted to do these big, we wanted to do a deep dive into transportation with the Connect SA program by the mayor, and have town hall meetings and have everybody come in person and meet the pollster and ask questions. And obviously all of that got blown up this year because of the pandemic, even the funding levels and where the money would go with transit. And it also led us to the workforce initiative by Mayor Nirenberg on the ballot, and the need for how do we come out of this pandemic where we've got a healthy, thriving community. I think we all understand the need for transit. Obviously, in the polling, it's there. Jorge, do you mind walking us through how you see the workforce initiative? Our poll shows that it polls very, very well. Can you give us more details on the campaign and how you see this playing out?
Yeah, look, I mean, we feel very confident. I believe all three initiatives are going to win on November the 3rd. I'm with you. I think it's a presidential year. I think Democrats will outvote the Republicans in Bexar County. And I think all three have Republican support and Democratic support, but it's definitely more Democratic support, right? That's where the numbers are just really, really high. Look, obviously, in March, things changed for the world, right? I mean, none of us could have ever imagined, right, that we would be at our homes, and Zoom was, something that we just thought was a word, right? And now it's a platform that we all use to conduct our daily lives, right? So it's just been an interesting time, and we've all had to adapt, and so the mayor had to adapt, right? He said, okay, we're going to get some money from the federal government, we're going to use some money from the general fund, and we're going to help people, right? San Antonio has done an admirable job of helping our people, right? We have the #1 housing assistance program in the country. We've already put a lot of money towards workforce development, and the mayor wants to double down on that, right? So he found a way to in conjunction with VIA, right, say, okay, we're going to do 4 years of workforce development, $154 million with all the partners in town, and make sure that people get retrained for jobs that exist today, right? It's not let's hope jobs come and then we have a trained workforce. It's we're going to put you on a pipeline. We're going to train you for a job that's in existence. So when you get out, you're going to get that job, right? And Christian, and I think everybody else knows on this call, that one of the main things San Antonio lacks is a knowledge-based economy, right? We have to elevate ourselves. Why is it that Austin always gets all the jobs, right? It's because what do they say? Well, they have trained folks. So we're going to go up there, and then that stimulates their economy to no end. You went to UT. What does Austin look like today from when you went there, right? Because I was up there too. And it's not even the same city, man, right? And so I just think we can do that for San Antonio. I think this is one of the ways we can do that for San Antonio. And this is a way for us to help people that need help today and probably needed it before the pandemic, right? So,
no doubt. I mean, you think when you look at our big hotels downtown, and you think of all of those jobs, right? How do they get to the jobs, right? What happens when those jobs go away in the tens of thousands when you snap your fingers?
Yeah.
It's a frightening prospect for our city, for the future of our city. And you know what's ironic is here on the ballot this November, we are going to have education, transit, and workforce development all tied together, right? I think that in the end, when you look at the Achilles heel of our city and of our community, we're trying to address the things that matter the most. So that we are not, light years behind at the end of this pandemic. And there's so much, guys, and I can't thank you enough for participating on this. I think we need to do more of this. I think we need to have more interaction that's bipartisan. I want to close by asking each one of you a question because I know you all personally, and I know that San Antonio and Bexar County matter a lot to you and your hearts and how you think about it, even though we come from different perspectives. And that is, if you could wave a magic wand at the end of this pandemic, and money wasn't an option to Delmer. So forget it. Take your financial hat off for a minute, and I want to ask each of you, if you had a magic wand and you could make San Antonio better. Tom, I'm going to start with you. If you could make San Antonio better by waving a magic wand, what's the first thing that you would do?
I think we have to stop the brain drain. And the reason I say that, I mean, we just had a conversation about workforce, and we reference higher education institutions in Austin, but we have 5 degree granting universities in San Antonio. We have one of the largest and best community college districts in the entire country. We're pumping out hundreds of thousands of people. We also have the best and brightest military who over 4,000 of them are getting out every year. So we have tens of thousands of people who are leaving. We don't have places for them. I don't think it's as much about the job training as it is the retention of those folks. I mean, 1,500 jobs in cybersecurity are going to go unfilled in San Antonio this year simply because we don't have those people.
Yeah. I think it's super smart. Jorge, if you had a magic wand and you could fix our city, and we've got an Achilles heel, where do you wave your magic wand?
So I guess 2 things. Number 1, food insecurity. The fact that 60,000 people had to go to the food bank to put food on their table pre-pandemic is unacceptable, right? And the fact that doubled to 120 once the pandemic hit is just a travesty, right? But I think the way to do that is through what we're trying to do, which is just give people jobs that are higher wage jobs that can give them a better quality of life economically. So I agree with Tom, and I think that's if we can do that for our city, I think it'll elevate us in all different ways, right? Because if people are making more money, they're spending more money. That means there'll be more money in the economy, and everybody can thrive.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were the national news story about the lines after the pandemic, and they took the picture that made it around the world. Yeah, it really made you stop and pause. And to give a shout out to Eric Cooper and to the food bank, the San Antonio Food Bank, and the work that they've done over the last 6 months has just been, it's been heroic. Jonathan, let me go to you. Your magic wand, what do you fix immediately?
Thomas brought up a really good point about the university systems that we have here and the education all around. We've got people leaving San Antonio, and in regard to the military part of what he said, they're coming back here to retire after they've been elsewhere. So getting them to stay here, I think, is the key part of that. Being more aggressive from the city side, going after business, Amazon comes to mind, things like that, really going out and trying to get more companies to move to San Antonio to provide those jobs, not just the Toyotas of the world, not just, it's got to be small to really big. And I don't think the city has done a good enough job at that. I'm not going to say they've done a bad job. I'm just saying I think we can do better. And that's a great belief. But, both of those guys really kind of filled everything in for me too. So I'd be doubling it up. So,
yeah, Laura, you get the final word.
The great important thing about working on a transit campaign is that our puns just go on and on. So I'm going to jump on the bandwagon and stay on the rails of the pitch of that. I'd like to see with my magic wand, public transportation in a way that we've never seen before. An investment. I mean, to me, that is what to Jonathan's point, that's what attracts big businesses into San Antonio. It's what moves people. I grew up in Austin, and I remember when it was a little sleepy town, and now I just can't stand going to Austin because of the traffic. And you see them now dealing with literally $1 billion transit proposition on their ballot, which is a tax increase for them. And for us, I don't want San Antonio to go there. We can't pave our way out of the growth that we're going to be experiencing it. We see it. I see it every day. People are coming into our wonderful, wonderful city. And, to me, public transportation and having that is so critical. Get people out of their cars, get them on public transportation, but something like, we're going to talk really magic wand. Can I be really magic wand here? Like, let's do monorails, like in Disneyland. Like, I want to do monorails. But seriously, but really, 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 I just feel like public transportation is key. Getting people to those jobs, getting people to that education, connecting them. To me, it is among the great equalizer. And not just any job, good paying jobs, living wage jobs, right? That's how we build people out of poverty. That's how we get them to invest in education. That's the key. Good paying livable jobs and access to get them there.
Yes. Well, Laura, that's awesome. And thank you for those thoughts. 2 quick rapid fire questions. Will we have a new president? No. Delmer's the no.
I hope so.
Tom, you think Trump wins?
Yeah, I think he's going to.
Yeah. Jorge?
After 2016, man, I don't know, but it's going to be a close race. I'll say that. It's tough. I mean, obviously, I think Biden's got a great shot, but after 2016, man, anything can happen.
And Laura and I were talking right before we got on this on the podcast. We were both like, yeah, we predicted Clinton landslide victories, and no longer prognosticating races. I'll put it out there. I think Biden crushes Trump.
Oh,
I
wow.
think it's going to be an electoral landslide, and I think Florida and Ohio likely go to Biden. And if Florida and Ohio go to Biden, then I think it's an electoral landslide. With Arizona and even Texas. So let's talk about Texas for a second. Does anybody think that the Democrats will take back the Texas House? I'll start with you, Jorge.
Yeah, no, I do. I think
we need the Democrats need 9 seats.
Yeah, no, I think they get it. I didn't think that for a while, but from what I've been hearing, obviously we have a lot of friends around the state. Everybody I talk to, I just think, we're going to flip the House, but that's it. I don't think we win statewide this year. I think we'll get close. We'll get Bethel numbers, but I'm not sure we'll flip the state yet,
Laura, your prognostication, House or no?
Again, it goes down to that metaphor I talked about earlier, the perfect storm, right? We've got all those things happening. And if they continue to happen through Election Day, I think there's possibilities. We have an unpopular incumbent who, people are energized to get out of office. We have groups of his supporters who are leaving him, mainly seniors and white suburban women. And then you've got this high enthusiasm for voting and then money being invested into the race. So if these 4 things kind of continue from now until Election Day, I think there's certainly possibilities. But I will I will not prognosticate.
And Jonathan, you waved me off on you were waving your head no from the word minute go. So I know where you stand. Tom, what do you think? Democrats competitive in the Texas House races?
I think they're going to get closer to a 50-50 split, but I don't think they're going to take the House back. I mean, the only race that's really competitive in Bexar County, is the Selena Montoya versus Steve Allison, 121. The missteps on the Montoya campaign in the last 2 weeks prior to early voting, claiming an endorsement she didn't have, throwing dirt right at Steve Allison's feet that was untrue, and he was able to prove it. She's not going to win that race, so that's not going to get it there.
Just for disclosure, I gave Selena Montoya money, so I'm on board with Selena. But I think that that's the race to watch for the state. If Montoya were to win in Bexar County in that race, I think the Texas Democrats take back the Texas House, because that's going to be with Wendy Davis in the competitive congressional race. I think you've got the Christine Hortek-Tristan Berry race with money being exchanged there. That if Montoya were to win that state House seat, I think that's going to be the race, the bell cow as to how Democrats did across the country or across the Texas. Right. So once again, guys, we could sit here for hours and hours. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your crazy campaign lives right now to focus on this. But I hope that we can do it again. I hope you guys will come back. And next year we'll have exciting stuff like the mayor's race. And then back to the point of Bexar Facts, which is really to do a deeper dive into things that matter to us and how are we constantly making Bexar County and San Antonio better. So thank you all again so much. And we'll talk to you soon. Good luck in your elections.
All right, thank you.
We'll see you guys on election day.
Thank you all. Good